Now let's talk about some undesirable clotting. The fact is, we're making small incidental clots through our bodies all the time, and most of the time they get broken down. But a clot that is formed in an unbroken vessel is a thrombus, and depending on its location, it can be deadly, particularly in areas like the heart. So, if blood flow slowed to a point, or there was some tissue damage to a vessel in the heart and a clot formed, it could block off blood flow to a vital area of the heart, resulting in tissue death. Um, and that's basically a heart attack. An embolus is where we have a clot that is formed and it breaks away and floats through the bloodstream, lodging someplace undesirable. Um, it can later clog a vessel in some critical area, such as the brain, or if it forms in a vein, makes it through the heart, it could result in a blockage in the lungs. Uh, Neither of these is a desirable situation. Again, we're talking about potential for stroke, pulmonary embolism, heart attacks, a variety of things that can occur. Now, we've done an exercise in lab about blood groups and blood transfusions. If we've not done it, we will shortly, but let's talk a little bit about this. Transfusion is really the only way to replace blood quickly. We can rebuild our blood supply, and for normal cuts and bruises and things like that, our ability is just fine. But if you donate a pint of blood, it is 5 or 6 weeks before you can donate again. We just cannot make up a pint loss or 2 pints loss any faster than that. So a large loss of blood can have some serious consequences. If you lost 15 to 30%, and let's say we have 5 liters. So if you lost a liter of blood, there's a good chance that you're going to have some weakness. If you lost much more than that, you're going to start having the symptoms of shock. Now, shock is where tissues are dying off because they're not getting enough oxygen. Um, our body preserves the blood supply to the heart, to the brain, uh, kind of as the last, but peripheral systems could start to shut down if you lost sufficient quantities of blood. And the only way we can replace that quickly again is through a transfusion. Now, this gets into our immune system because our immune system recognizes cells that are foreign to us. We have a means of kind of matching. The closer the match, the more likely it is that our immune system won't catch it. And fortunately for us, blood is relatively simple in terms of the markers that are on it that could be recognized as foreign. So transfused blood still has to be of the same or a compatible blood type. Now, human blood groups, the way that our immune system recognizes something is foreign is by certain proteins, sugars, and things like that that are located on the surface of cells. On our body cells, we have this thing called the major histocompatibility complex, which identifies our cells as uniquely ours. Um, on blood cells, it's a little simpler. We have a couple of proteins that cause us issues. Actually, there are about 30, but three that really cause problems for us. And these are known as antigens because anything that can elicit the activity of the immune system is antigenic. The things within the immune system that react to antigens, one of them is this protein that is an antibody, which is produced by the B cells. Now, we type blood by the antigens that are on the body of those cells. So if I have the A antigen, I have type A blood. If I have both the A antigen and the B antigen, I have type AB blood. If I don't have any antigens at all, I have type O. So we type blood based on that. But the fact is that there are antibodies within our bloodstream for exactly the opposite of what we have. So if I have type A blood, I have type B antibodies, which means my blood, my immune system will react against anything that has a B antigen on it. So there are actually over 30 common antigens, and these can cause some reactions of their own, but the ones that give us the big thing are the A and the B antigen and the RH antigen. And from that, we get what we call the ABO blood types, which is based on the presence or absence of those two antigens, A and B. And then we have A or B, and we talk about a positive or a negative. So an AB positive person has both the A and the B antigen and also the RH antigen. If you are AB negative, you have the A and the B antigen, but you do not have the RH antigen. So let's talk about how these come into play. The presence of both antigens, A and B, is called type AB. The presence of antigen A is known as type A. The presence of antigen B is type B. This is a result of genetics and what you inherit from mom and dad. You get a gene from mom and a gene from dad. And if I were to get an A from mom and a B from dad, I'd have type AB. If I got both A's or an A from both parents, I'd be type A. If I got B's from both parents, I'd be type B. Actually, a gene that doesn't code for anything results in a type O. But A and B are dominant. So if I got a gene for A from dad, but I got a gene for O from mom, I would still be type A. It's only if I get two O's that I am type O. This does impact what can react with what. See, we talked about there being antibodies against the opposite. And so if I have type AB blood, I don't have any antibodies against A or B. So I can receive A and B and AB, and because type O blood doesn't have any markers on its surface, I can take that too. And that makes AB our universal recipient. Now, blood type B can only receive type B. It can also receive type O because type O blood doesn't have any markers on its surface that will activate a person's immune system. Type A can receive type A and type O. Type O can only receive type O blood. Now, you notice that type O can give to any of these folks. So type O is the universal donor. You would think that that would be bad for someone who is type O, but the fact is that type O is the most common of the blood types. It makes up close to half, 45% of the population, depending on ethnicity, from somewhere between 45 and 79%. Type AB is the rarest. It is the universal recipient, though, so it can receive from almost anybody. Again, some variations from one type to another, but as you can see, type O is our most common. Now, the Rh factor is an additional antigen which can appear on the surface of red blood cells. And in our bloodstreams, if I have type A blood, I will have type B antibodies. And that's just how our bloodstream develops. But Rh factor is a little different. We actually have to be exposed to the Rh factor at some point to develop antibodies against it. And that's not even an issue for most people. And the fact is, most people, 90% of the population, have Rh positive blood. That is, they have the Rh factor or antigen on the surface of their cells, so they don't have any antibodies against it. That's 90% of the population. But there's 10% of the population who is Rh negative. That is, they don't have that antibody, or I'm sorry, not the antibody, they do not have the antigen on their red blood cells. Now, in this situation, if an Rh negative person gets exposed to Rh positive blood, they will start to make antibodies. But the first time they're exposed, there's not going to be any reaction that can occur. And this comes into play with women, pregnant women who are, the mom's Rh negative, but the baby is Rh positive. And we'll do a little digression here on mother immunity and baby immunity to explain this. So I'm going to give you a brief primer on immunity. See, generally speaking, we have to be exposed to some element for us to develop antibodies against it. Since the baby's blood doesn't cross the placental barrier, it doesn't get into mom's blood through the entire pregnancy. Uh, and so if mom is Rh negative and the baby's Rh positive, it's really not a problem during that first pregnancy. But childbirth is messy, and during the process of childbirth, the placenta tears, and there's usually a little bit of baby's blood that does get mixed with mom's blood. And if mom is Rh negative and the baby's Rh positive, mom's immune system looks at that Rh positive factor on the red blood cells and says, "What is this?" and starts to make antibodies against it. Now, babies are born and they don't get sick for a while, which is quite remarkable because there are germs all over the place. And the reason that they don't get sick is that antibodies can cross the placental barrier. Blood cells don't, but antibodies can. And so mom, through the course of her pregnancy, is giving the baby her own antibodies. And so when the baby's born, for a period of a few months, it is completely immune to anything that mom's ever been exposed to. Now, admittedly, over time, those antibodies wear out, and then the child starts getting sick, usually 6, 7 months after it was born. But this does give it the ability to adapt to its new environment before it becomes ill. So, mom's had an Rh positive baby. This will happen if dad's Rh positive and mom's Rh negative. So she's had an Rh positive baby, and the first pregnancy went fine, but at childbirth, her body got exposed to some Rh positive cells, and now it's making antibodies against that Rh factor. Well, next pregnancy comes along, and this is also an Rh positive baby. Well, mom's antibodies are crossing the placental barrier, and the antibodies against that Rh factor are actually attacking and destroying the baby's red blood cells. As a result, the baby probably won't even make it to term, but if it did, it would still have some serious deficits because it wouldn't have enough red blood cells. Tissues wouldn't develop, it would be undersized, it would probably have brain development problems. But again, most likely, it just wouldn't survive. This condition is referred to either as hemolytic disease of the newborn or erythroblastosis fetalis. And what's happening there is that mom's immune system is literally going in and killing the baby. At one time, this was an issue. Now, you may have heard stories of someone who had one child and then could never bring another one to term. Uh, this would be stories from the 40s, 50s, but I grew up and there was someone in our neighborhood, a couple, and they had had one child, and mom got pregnant several times afterward, but could never carry to term. The likelihood is that the first child was Rh positive. The subsequent children were also Rh positive, and her immune system was killing those babies off. Uh, Fortunately, we do have something that can take care of that now. There is a shot called Rogam, and it is given to Rh negative moms throughout the pregnancy, at least at the end of the pregnancy during childbirth. And what it does is it binds to the um, the Rh factor on red blood cells, preventing mom's immune system from ever seeing it. And as a result, she never develops an immunity, so she can carry subsequent children to term as well. Now, having discussed that, this is a good stopping place for us. We will pick up on additional factors associated with blood in a fourth presentation.